You are listening to Insights from the Conference Board.
Hello, I'm Laura Sabattini, Principal Researcher in the Human Capital Center.
And I am John Stoddard, Manager Executive Programs of the Diversity Inclusion Councils at the Conference Board.
It is our pleasure to welcome you to another edition of Insights, a podcast series that helps talent leaders stay informed about current issues across all of human capital. Today, we're speaking with Miriam Vidalon, VP of Diversity and Inclusion, and Kim Graham, Senior Manager for Diversity and Inclusion at Nielsen, about their employee resource group strategy and initiatives. More specifically, we're going to talk about how they went about shifting priorities and engaging ERG members and allies when the COVID-19 crisis started. The Conference Board just published a case study on the work that Nielsen is doing with their ERGs. It's entitled Employee Resource Groups, Growing Inclusion Through Allyship. The case study is posted at the bottom of the podcast description on our website.
A few words about our guest. Miriam serves as Vice President, Diversity and Inclusion at Nielsen. In her role, Miriam works with leaders and associates to leverage diversity and inclusion as pivotal to business growth and innovation. Miriam is responsible for leading Nielsen's employee resource groups in 100+ countries around the world. Kim Graham is a Senior Manager for Diversity and Inclusion at Nielsen. She is responsible for the organization's inclusive talent practices, from recruiting and interviewing to onboarding and retention. She serves as the chair of the Atlanta Inclusion Impact Team, where she drives the strategy set by the employee resource group leads. Miriam, Kim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, John. So before we start to talk about your ERG strategy in depth, Miriam and Kim, I wanted to provide some context for our listeners and for our conversation. We first spoke about Nielsen's ERG in 2019. At the time, the Conference Board was conducting a study called What is Next for Employee Groups, which has been since then published. And at the time, you had shared that Nielsen had just gone through an organizational change that had given you the opportunity to reshape your ERG strategy. So you already had implemented a number of changes before COVID-19 started. Can you tell us a bit more about this and what kind of changes you had made?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2019, after assessing our D&I progress, we challenged our thinking about 3 areas we wanted to impact with our strategy. We wanted to improve our talent, diversity, and promotion, culture, and we also knew that we could only do this if we built in accountability into our process. So as a result, Nielsen went through this organizational change, Laura, that you mentioned, and 2 big items changed. The first one is D&I was moved into the human resources team. And secondly, our CEO took on the role of Chief Diversity Officer. And he did this to really send the message that D&I is the responsibility of everyone in the business. It is core to our business, and it is not a side job. So we leveraged these changes as our new beginning. We embarked on this Erg Redesign Journey. We crowdsourced ideas from over 1,000 people across the globe, different levels of the organization, and we actually used design thinking to come up with our new global ERG program. So some of the things we wanted to achieve was, 1, we wanted to embrace a Go Global, Act Local framework. Secondly, we wanted to embed ERG contributions within the performance reviews. People were feeling that the ERG work often fell in the lap of a few people, and it was seen as an after-school project. Thirdly, we wanted to have leadership from the top, and we aligned each one of our executive committee leaders to lead and sponsor one of the employee resource groups. 4, we wanted to increase allyship. Many people felt they wanted to lean in, they did not know how. And on the other side of the coin, some people felt that all the responsibility of D&I fell on the lap of the diverse associates. We also wanted to address intersectionality. Intersectionality is real. I myself am a Hispanic woman, and many times I was faced with the decision as an employee before I took on this role on whether I should volunteer actively on Women in Nielsen or should I do OLA. And many people were facing multiple decisions in terms of their affinities and where they could invest their time volunteering. So we wanted to address that. And finally, we wanted to drive systemic change. We wanted to use our program not only to drive event-specific programming, but really to drive systemic change around our affinity-specific goals. So with these priorities or principles in mind, we looked at the structure of the program and we separated our employee resource groups at the regional level to focus on more systemic improvements. So we created ERG regional leaders that could actually elevate the voice of the affinity and work with our sponsors to create programming that really challenges Nielsen systems. At the local level, each office, we created what is called an inclusion impact team, and each office created this almost like a diversity board with people represented different affinities to act as one team, to really bring together the affinities, to prioritize the calendar, to drive, in each one of these teams have a chair, vice chair, and they have a leader assigned to each one of our key objectives. So for instance, we have a talent recruitment leader, we have a talent development leader, and these inclusion impact teams are diverse. They're aligned to the regional affinities. They represent the voice of our affinities, but also it allows us for having allies taking the lead in some of these positions.
How did you go about customizing your strategy to respond to the need from COVID-19? Can you give us examples of what you did and how you engaged the groups in the process?
Sure, yeah. So as Miriam had just described, we had just launched our new ERG structure with the inclusion impact teams when COVID-19 happened. And it really fundamentally changed not only the way we work with each other across Nielsen, but also the way we live in our day-to-day lives. And so our team had to rapidly pivot to put our people first and make sure that we prioritized work. And we focused on 3 key areas. So the first was to ensure that we were amplifying the voices of our associates globally through our ERGs. So we started holding listening sessions attended by our executives, and members were able to bubble up input, needs, and concerns that were affecting them during the time. So some examples of those outcomes from those conversations that we implemented from direct feedback are we were able to socialize lessons learned coming back into the office from our ERG team out in China. We launched global wellness webinars and country by country employee assistant programs so that everyone had access to the assistance that was available to them. We expanded our health benefits to include virtual visit checkups. We deployed local support in key markets for non-native associates. We also distributed in-language Spanish resources to our U.S. associates, and that was led by our OLA ERG. And we also socialized important time away information among our SERV members, which are our military members and support who might have been called back to serve during the pandemic. Secondly, another key area was providing resources and a network to sustain our associates to have meaningful connections. And so, a large part of that was working from home resources. As we all shifted to a virtual environment, it was important to ensure that everyone had the technical equipment and resources that they needed, but also resources to help them build effective teams in the virtual environment. There was a lot of anxiety around, performance evaluation and measuring performance and goal setting when it came to the new virtual environment that we were in. And so we developed toolkits to make sure that we were addressing those needs. The Inclusion Impact Team specifically launched a campaign called I Got You, and that was where we held virtual fitness classes as well as happy hours to ensure that we were maintaining those meaningful and fun connections. And we also held virtual broadcasts just showcasing different associates across the globe in their work environment and what they were doing to cope. We also rolled out Nielsen clubs in our Quick Connections program. So things like groups for Nielsen parents, as parents were working from home and also educating their children, but also things more fun like book clubs and movie clubs that people could remain connected. And then finally, under resources, we also launched My Mentor Circles to help associates continue those conversations. So making sure we were providing support for those who were quarantined, as an example, with people who had children with autism. Those types of concerns and issues were bubbled up, and we were able to apply resources to it. And then finally, I would say we focused on our advocacy efforts. So Nielsen became a really loud voice for the fight against xenophobia in every market that we operate. And we launched a Wash the Hate campaign that was global. And then also we became the voice of diverse communities regarding important topics. So when I think about those listening tours that we held, important things that were affecting different diverse groups came up. And so, one example of that initiative was the U.S. Census. And so we have Project True Count where thinking about our diverse populations, they're oftentimes undercounted. And we made sure that, everyone was being counted and that they were supporting that initiative as well. So those are some of the key focus areas that came out of centralizing ERGs within our company and providing a valuable response to our employees during the pandemic.
Okay. Those are all great.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam and Kim, for sharing. We're going to take a short break for some quick announcements and be back in just a minute to continue our conversation with Miriam and Kim about Nielsen's employee resource groups.
Can you, your team, or your company benefit from insights such as the ones provided in this podcast? They are immediately available when you join the Conference Board, a membership-based think tank that delivers trusted insights for what's ahead. Reaching across industries and geographies, we bring together our noted experts, senior executives from the world's largest companies, and nonpartisan practical research to help you address your most important business issues. Our membership packages are tailored to your organization's unique needs and budget. To learn more about our offerings, go to www.conferenceboard.org and click Join on the top bar to connect with one of our product specialists.
Hello, and welcome back to our conversation about Nielsen's case study, Employee Resource Groups, Growing Inclusion Through Allyship, with our two guests, Miriam Vidilon, VP Diversity Inclusion, and Kim Graham, Senior Manager for Diversity Inclusion at Nielsen. Before the break, we outlined some of the strategic and structural elements of Nielsen's ERG strategies. Allyship is one of the core components of that said strategy. Can you speak to that? I know you mentioned it before, Kim, but I'm also sure that our listeners are interested to learn more about what your inclusion impact teams are.
Yeah, of course. So as we were analyzing the input from our associates around the globe, the following themes kept emerging. One, people were saying, I want to help. I just don't know how. I don't know what ERG to select. I just know that I want to lean in and be part of the D&I movement. Two, diverse associates gave us input of burnouts and how they wish they had more support. And they wanted people to lean in and didn't want to feel alone. And thirdly, we knew that to grow a truly inclusive culture, if we want to drive equity, we need to educate people who are not part of the community. We need to engage those who are not in the community. So even though our ERGs were open to everyone before the redesign, people still felt this way, and we wanted to address it. We did three main things. One, we added a general membership option for people who were not sure what ERG to select. They could still join the program. They could become part of the community and receive information across the board for all of the affinities. Secondly, we launched our inclusion impact teams, as I mentioned before, and we gave these general members an opportunity to raise their hand and lean in. They could volunteer, they could lead different areas of the inclusion impact team that they felt passionate to learn about, and they could do that alongside the diverse peers. And I can tell you that it was amazing input. A lot of diverse associates felt very reassured to have people who were not diverse saying, you know what, I want to lean in and provide my skill set to further career development opportunities. They saw their managers also leaning in and saying, I want to be part of this team. I want to go on campus and help you recruit people of color. And we also included all of our members. The third action we took is we included all of our members, including general members, in all of the ERG education broadcasts. In any affinity type education, we also included them so they can be exposed to very open and candid conversations that could change minds and hearts.
That's great, Miriam, and this is such a great approach to engage allies and as you mentioned before, also people who might not want maybe choose one group or the other, or that want to work across different dimensions of diversity. And I know that many of the listeners who have ERGs can really use some of the tips that you provided. And as a follow up, one of the things also that you mentioned, and I think it would be great to cover a bit more, is about how you are engaged people managers and supervisors. Those supervisors, these are the people that often are managing and supervising ERG members or leaders. Can you tell us a bit more, first of all, why you believe it is important to engage managers, and also how it has worked so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to your point, it is really important. I think about, a famous saying that kind of references people leave managers and not their jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so our managers can really make or break the culture of a company. They're responsible for hiring, firing, promoting, and really becoming the face of every interaction with their associates. And so a key component of feeling that you belong is whether you feel your manager cares about you as a person. And we know that we needed to make our managers a part of this program and this movement. So our CEO and Chief Diversity Officer, David Kinney, actually mandated that all managers become members of the ERG program. So we developed insights and around our progress so we could measure those gaps. And secondly, we included D&I in the ERG program education within our first-time manager training. And we hosted a global webinar to walk them through the program and the importance of their participation. So we wanted to make sure that they felt supported with that new endeavor and made sure that they understood the importance of that. And then finally, we added D&I contributions to the end of the year performance evaluation forms. So managers must reflect now on how they are driving our culture of inclusion forward. And we also send all managers a mid-year and end-of-year recap of the contributions that our ERGs and inclusion impact team leaders have had on the organization.
That's great. And again, I'm continuing to be impressed, by all the different things that you're doing. And I'm sure that many of our listeners will really appreciate your strategy. Believe it or not, we're almost at time. And I wanted to thank you again for, speaking with us. Maybe the last question to wrap everything up would be any last thoughts on what we discussed. And as we think about organizations dealing with similar challenges that you are, what would you recommend to others who are working with ERGs? Is there one thing that you would like others to take away from this discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Laura and John, for the opportunity. I would say do not be relentless. ERGs are a very powerful source of information so that you can improve the employee experience and you can make your organization a truly representative and inclusive workplace. So it's very important that you set up and you manage this program as you would any other business initiative. One, get champions who will bet on your program from the top. Two, involve everyone. Crowdsource ideas because D&I is not only for a selected few. Three, design the program with the employee at the center because business outcomes will follow. Many times people want to design the program with a business outcome instead of focusing on the employee to lead the business outcome. And I think that something that has worked for us is to do the opposite. Mm-hmm. 4, have bold goals and measure your success. And finally, look for ways to recognize the contributions of the leaders who give it their all. Add it to the performance evaluation, share updates and give them a shout out internally and externally. I think it's very important that people know that this work doesn't go unnoticed.
That's great. Kim?
Yeah, I certainly echo the thoughts from Miriam, especially around the idea of relentlessness. And I would add that it will be important for organizations to not let great be the enemy of good, right? So many organizations could overthink the launch of any type of ERG program or initiative that support and empower employees. And really, the only way to be successful is to take that first step. As we have described, we've had to pivot our program on a dime to make sure that we were providing value to our employees based on the changing environment. But what has been great is that we've had an adaptable framework already in place to truly prioritize meeting those needs and sourcing ideas from the highly engaged members to ensure that we are meeting our objectives.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. I do want to say, one of the reasons we asked you to be a part of this webcast is Laura and I work closely with a lot of our members that engage in diversity, equity, inclusion work, and your work is quite innovative. You're thinking about not only just best practices, but next practices and being future oriented and considering COVID-19, allyship, including white cisgender men, is also so very important. So we really appreciate you. And thank you again, Miriam, Kim, for your time and sharing your insights.
Thank you both. We enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, and thank you to our listeners for joining. If you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe to our Insights podcast series or explore the entire catalog of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website, www.conference-board.org/podcast. This is John Stoddard from the Conference Board, and thank you. Until next time.
This has been Insights from the Conference Board.